This is Frank Fantini. We are here with Geoff Freeman, who is the CEO of the American Gaming Association. And Geoff, you've been several years now as CEO of the AGA, and you've made a lot of changes, making this a much larger, more inclusive organization, and much more proactive in terms of public policy. What are the priorities for the AGA right now?
Well, first of all, Frank, I think the industry has made a lot of changes in the past few years, and over the past couple decades, the industry has evolved quite significantly, and AGA simply needed to follow the course of the industry. We too had to evolve. I think that when you look at what are our core priorities, where do we focus the most, the thing that we are doing most is telling the story of this industry. This industry has a great story to tell, represented in 40 states across the country, $240 billion in economic impact, 1.7 million jobs. The communities in which we're doing business are passionate about having us there. The relationships we're building with local community organizations are strong. That's a story we have to tell. We've been, I think, guilty as an industry of being very Nevada-centric as far as our image goes. We've got an opportunity to do something bigger and better than that, and that's where AGA is focused. Shame on us if we don't take advantage of the fact that we have that great story to tell, and I think it's critical to our future. We're not just telling that story for the sake of telling it. We're telling it for two reasons. One, we need to build champions who are inclined to both protect and promote this industry for years to come. In the media, public officials, we need those champions, number one. Number two, we need to change some policies. The policies that this industry is dealing with at the state level are oftentimes inconducive to reinvestment and innovation. So that storytelling is critical to driving better policy.
American Gaming Association is just said it's American, it's a national association. And yet, as you just mentioned, policy is really determined mostly at the legislative level in the states. How does the AGA interact with that federal environment?
Sure. When AGA was first created, it was created out of fear, I think, of a potential federal tax on gaming and limitations on expansion. And those issues are still there. We need to watch those closely. There are also a host of other federal issues. The IRS proposal to change the tax withholding on slot machines and to track our players. The anti-money laundering issues we deal with the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. There's an effort afoot to affect resort fees that casinos offer. So there's no shortage of threats coming at the federal level. We also have opportunities, and I'm sure we'll talk about sports betting today. That's a great opportunity at the federal level. In addition to that, though, I think it's important that AGA begin to become more active at the state level. Just this past year, we were outspoken in Pennsylvania when a proposal was made to tax free play, a really absurd proposal that was going to reduce the amount of tax they generated in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's one example of where I think we can play a role. We're playing a role in Georgia and other markets that consider expansion. Our role isn't to tell them they should or shouldn't expand, but our role is to set the record straight as to what the casino industry is, what we believe the value is, so people can make an informed decision at the local level.
The gaming industry is converging in a lot of different ways, and we see new forms of gaming. We see esports. Last year at this time, daily fantasy sports was a big buzzword. Social gaming has come out of like nowhere. And even though it's technically not gaming as in gambling, it's still obviously an integral part of this larger gaming industry. How do you see the AGA's role encompassing those new and emerging forms of gaming?
Well, I'm going to say something that is certainly my opinion, and it's where the AGA is heading, not necessarily an opinion that's shared across the industry. You mentioned three things. You mentioned esports, you mentioned daily fantasy sports, you mentioned social games, and what all three of those things have in common, they've all begun, at least, in more of a gray market. And I think that's a lesson for us. We all want innovation in this industry, but we all know, if we want to face that, if we want to face the truth with that heavily regulated industries don't have extraordinary innovation. The regulations often prevent that type of bold and creative thinking. There's a reason these things are happening in the gray market. Our challenge is to figure out how do we bring them into the world of regulation, without killing them in the process. Let the gray market be that area where trial and error takes place, where things are tested, where consumer demand is determined. And when some of those products succeed, let's figure out how to bring them into this world without killing them. I get very concerned, the old taxi cab to Uber spectrum. I'm not saying we need to be Uber as an industry, but we sure as heck don't need to be the taxi cab industry. We need to find our niche in the middle, and I think that means looking for innovative products and finding a way to embrace them in the future.
Right. And that's also changing the regulatory mindset in some cases.
It certainly is, and I'm pleased to say that's happening. We saw in Indiana last year a debate as to the future of their industry, and they said, let's bring the riverboats onto dry land and build some brick and mortar properties. That's progressive thinking. It's not necessarily the boldest, but it's progressive. Louisiana is doing the same thing right now, where they're asking the question, how do we make our industry competitive in the years ahead? Other states are doing that. That's exactly the conversation we need to have. And as an industry, we need to be bold and bring them ideas as to ways we can make this industry more capable of reinvesting in its product, which means taking a hard look at the tax rates, more capable of innovating, which means taking a hard look at the onerous and often duplicative and unnecessary regulations, and more capable of simply providing our customer with the products they demand. We need to be nimble. Regulators need to empower us to be nimble. A lot of our storytelling is helping to create an environment where we can have that discussion.
You've made the point, and I think Frank Parenkoff before you had made the point about taxes. And there's a tendency for legislators to focus on the gaming revenue tax and to not focus on all the other benefits the state gets in terms of sales taxes, income taxes, taxes that vendors pay, and also the cost of that focus on the revenue tax, which is not developing other kinds of jobs and letting the casino industry become more of a resort industry. It's tough, however, to get a legislator to say we're going to lower the tax rate on any industry, no less gaming. How is the AGA addressing that, and what are the prospects of success?
Well, the first point you made was how they just look at the gaming tax, and I think that's true. I also think we fall into that trap as well. We often only talk about gross gaming revenue, and we know last year the gross gaming revenue for the commercial industry was about $38 billion. The gross gaming revenue for the tribal industry was about $30 billion. So about $68 billion is what the casino industry did. But yet I talked before about an industry that is $240 billion in size. We need to look at it more holistically. We need to look at it more broadly about the other benefits we provide and the economic impact we have. And really, I think, get away from talking about this in that narrow sense of gross gaming revenue so we can, as you suggest, get the legislators to think a little bit differently about the totality of the support that we're providing. AGA is doing that by talking more broadly, but I think to your other point, how do you convince these guys that maybe a lower tax rate could drive a greater volume of tax dollars? There's actually a study out of New York City from the 1990s, it's a little old and we need to find a way to refresh this, that showed that when the hotel tax rate went up, the total volume of tax dollars collected in New York went down. As the hotel tax rate went down, the total volume went up. How do we help to tell that story? How do we help to perhaps find a state that wants to partner with us that makes a slight reduction in tax rates, drives those new funds into reinvestment in the properties, and then follow that to see how it drives more revenue for the state? It needs to be a partnership at the end of the day. We recognize our industry came in to help support these communities in which we do business. We're here for the long haul. We need partners in government who want to work with us. We call it a progressive approach rather than a punitive approach, and I think we can find those case studies around the country.
Right. I can tell you as an old political reporter, it's hard to get legislators sometimes, some legislators, to have a more sophisticated understanding of how things interrelate. You mentioned sports betting, and we know that is a high priority, so tell us about it.
Well, let me say this. It's a high priority not because sports betting is some panacea that's going to fix the gaming industry of any problems it may have. No, sports betting is an opportunity. It's a growth opportunity, and we can't have enough growth opportunities. Ernst & Young estimates that the illegal market in this country right now is about $150 billion. Gambling Compliance estimated a couple weeks ago that if you legalize sports betting, you're looking at a gross gaming revenue total of about $12 billion. That's 50% bigger than Las Vegas itself. It's a big market, and it's a big opportunity. We're out there talking about this frequently because we have a law at the federal level which has failed to achieve its desired goal, as prohibition often does. This law was passed now nearly 25 years ago under the auspices of protecting our sports, protecting our communities by preventing sports betting from happening. In actuality, what we have is a market where our communities are less safe. Criminal activity is taking place in terms of sports betting. We just had a group of law enforcement officials come out last week and call for the repeal of the federal law that bans sports betting because it would make our communities more safe. The integrity of sports is at greater question without a regulated market. The National Basketball Association has been great and outspoken about calling for a legal and regulated sports betting market because they recognize that in a legal, transparent market, you're going to have access to more data, you're going to know where problems exist, you're going to be able to protect the integrity of your sport. So I think everything is lining up, quite frankly, in favor of the casino gaming industry. I think things are trending in the right direction, and I'm more confident than ever. This law will be repealed, and states will have the ability to choose if they want to offer sports betting. They've proven over the past 25 years that they can be effective regulators of gaming, and sports should be no different.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the AGA itself.
Sure.
And where it's going. The AGA was founded by the large casino companies, a lot Nevada-based, as you had referenced earlier, to represent basically the large casino industry. And in your tenure, you've broadened the membership considerably. Not only beyond that base, but also to people like us who are affiliated with the industry. Tomorrow, I believe it is, you're going to share a dais with
Ernie Stevens.
With Ernie Stevens from Tribal Gaming, and I remember there was a time when the AGA would say, no, they're competitors to our commercial interests. So you obviously have taken the AGA into a more universal and inclusive operation. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and a little bit about how you see the AGA evolving over the next couple of years?
My goal and the goal of the leaders of our organization and our chairman, Jim Murren of MGM, and others in a leadership role is to build the strongest organization we can build. And I think what we've learned over the years, both within our industry and watching other industries, that the strongest industries are unified industries. The more that we are rowing in the same direction, the more that we are speaking with one voice, the stronger we will be. It's when you exclude people, it's when you don't engage, that you end up nipping at each other's heels and prevent your own industry from achieving the great success that it could achieve. So we are inclusive with a purpose. We are inclusive because it feeds our goal of helping the broader casino industry achieve what it is that it sets out to achieve. It's what's going to help us achieve repeal of PASPA and empowering states to offer sports betting. It's what is helpful. It's what enables us to address issues like the IRS and anti-money laundering and resort fees. It's that power of the unity that makes this possible. We have about 95% of the supplier market as an active member of the AGA, 95% of the total revenue. We have about 87% of the commercial gaming market in our association, and we are growing in the tribal market. I'm tremendously proud of the support we have today from the Seminoles, Mohegan, Mashantucket, Pequot, the Chickasaw Nation, and Cherokee Nation. These are some of the biggest players in tribal gaming, and they are rowing in the same direction with the rest of the industry to pursue these goals. I think it makes us stronger, and I think you're going to see us continue to be inclusive in the years ahead. We want to build a 21st century organization that is defined by being inclusive, that is defined by transparency, that is defined by a very healthy debate and process in terms of determining where we stand on various issues. Our goal is to build the single strongest gaming industry we can build, and I think we're well on our way to doing that.
Well, we've covered an awful lot of ground in a very short period of time. Any other subjects you would like to address?
You know, the only other subject I would address, I think, is we look to the future of the industry and how we help this industry grow. We have to acknowledge that the opportunities for geographic expansion are limited. There's Georgia, there's certainly the great hope of Texas, but otherwise domestically the opportunities for expansion are limited. We have a $240 billion industry today. The question I'm asking is how do we make it a $300 billion industry? And I would suggest that I think the best way to do that is to take a hard look at the regulations, the tax policies, the other things that were put in place as this industry expanded around the country, and figure out what can we fix, what can we improve. That is the path to growth. Growth through public policy is going to be the future for this industry for the next 5-10 years. AGA is going to be a very active partner in that. As we talked about earlier, we will be active at the state level. We're looking for partners in the regulatory and legislative communities who want to work with the industry and drive growth through better policy. That's the opportunity for this industry to work together, and we're very excited to do that.
Well, Geoff, thank you very much. It's very, very informative and
Thank you,
insightful.
Frank. Really appreciate it.